Welcome back to Talking South for this episode 7, where I want to give a shout out to my buddies Robin Westenra in Australia and Sam Mitchell in Texas, New York, and New York, and Catskills. So I think you're both doing excellent work regarding the collapse of a civilization, and I know we've had our differences, in the past, but what is a little difference between friends when the whole planet is coming down in a collapse, So this episode is going to be about what happens when we have half a year of blue ocean event in the Arctic. That is when we lose the sea ice cover for the summer half of the year. And there was a paper recently in the Geophysical Research Letters that looked into what hasn't been studied much recently or in the past, and that's what actually happens when the midsummer and the sunniest parts of the year in the Arctic are completely free of ice for 6 months. And you may know that I have these plots showing when approximately we will have a half year ice free. So this is very interesting in that context. So what they basically find out, these scientists writing in Geophysical Research Letters, is that removing all the sea ice in the Arctic for half a year is equivalent, the increased sun albedo effect and the watts per square meters is equivalent to adding 1 trillion tons of CO2. And, in human history, we've only emitted 2.4 trillion tons of CO2. So it's like 1 trillion on top of those 2.4 trillion tons. That's a lot. It's almost half of what we've already emitted. So the extra carbon equivalent of losing all the sea ice for half a year is 1 trillion tons of carbon dioxide, and that in turn is the same as 25 years of current emissions of CO2. So basically it puts the global community 25 years later in the game, in their Paris game of limiting global warming to 2 degrees centigrade compared to pre-industrial. So yeah, losing 25 years at this stage, that's a lot. Okay, so I urge you to try and avoid to read the small print if you can, but I've read the small print, and that's why I'm making this video. So if you read the small print, it says it will be 25 years if the cloud cover in the Arctic stays the same, but of course we know that climate change has an element of change, and we also know that the cold Arctic seas, which today has a lot of fog and clouds over the open water parts, that is also going to change. Who would have thunk, eh? So if we warm up the Arctic and the Arctic Ocean, we will lose a lot of that cloud cover. It's almost like we're like frying the cloud cover that was there. So you get a lot more clouds, and in fact the paper itself says that we can get 3 times the warming effect of that initial effect that read 25 years. So I don't know, if we do the math, I think you'll find that 25 years delay in the global warming fight, that would be like 75 years, right? So then it's the small matter of heating up the East Siberian Arctic shelf, which will also be heating up when you lose all the sea ice cover and you get extra solar radiation. So we will eventually also set off the very, very, very large releases of methane, CH4. And I'm just making a guess here, but I think emitting all that CH4, all that methane to the atmosphere, will set us back at least 25 years extra. So if you then have 75 years just from the increased solar radiation with the loss of clouds, and you add 25 years to that, I think we're at 100 years. So that's the reason for the beautiful intro music from The Cure. And let's hope the worst case scenario of the worst case scenario doesn't happen, but you know, the science seems to indicate that it will. Okay, bye. So let me just backpedal a bit, because I think I said there would be more clouds in the Arctic. Of course, from the context, what I meant to say was the steady warming up of the Arctic will see less cloud cover in the Arctic Ocean. And I don't know about you, but from reading the Greenlandic sagas and different literature from the Greenland area from the centuries past, it's known to be a foggy, cloudy place. And we also know from the Inuit culture and their literature that when the Inuits go hunting, or for any reason want to know where the ice edge is or where the open ocean is, you know, in the old days you didn't have to look hard to find ice. It was more like finding the open spaces without ice. So their trick for finding the open water was that there would be fog and clouds over the open water. So the main difference, because I grew up in Norway, so the main difference between Scandinavia and Greenland is, apart from the ice of course, is that the, of course, ice-free waters in Scandinavia, they are not covered all the time with clouds and fog. You know, there is clouds and fog, of course, in Scandinavia, and especially in Western Norway. But the physics of cloud or fog formation is very connected to ice and very cold water. So you have relatively less fog in the southern parts of Scandinavia, where the ocean is warmer and the air is warmer, the atmosphere is warmer. So clearly you will have, it will be like Greenland and the Arctic is going south, literally. So 5 or 10 degrees warmer Arctic, then you will have sunshine unhindered by clouds and fog. And if it will be anything like the past, like 50 million years ago, you will have crocodiles swimming in the Arctic fjords, where the ice used to carve out the fjords and the ice used to fill the fjords in the 2010s and 2020s. So that's that. And I also want to give a shout out to my buddy Paul Beckwith in Canada. You're doing stellar work, buddy. I find I have to watch every video you put out, and it's a very good introduction to different science reports and articles that come out. And yeah, it's a real pleasure to have you on the team, and it makes all of our work easier because you obviously read a lot, and you publicize that reading in your videos and on your blog. So guys, if you follow my channel, go to paulbeckwith.net and check out his work. So back to the half-year Blue Ocean event, to when we will have half the year without sea ice in the Arctic. It will be a huge setback for civilization's death fight. You know, the civilization is sort of fighting to avoid collapse. And yeah, well, that fight is not really an open fight, because the opponent is Mother Earth, and Mother Earth has had quite enough, thank you, of humans and human civilization. So I think everybody on her team, and I count myself as one of those, are pretty satisfied and pretty sure that civilization is not going to win this battle. It's pretty obvious. So a lot of people tend to believe, or at least say, that when we lose all the sea ice, even for a day or for half a year, that's the big tipping point in the climate system. It's not. It's not the big tipping point. The big tipping point was decades ago, when we started losing sea ice faster and faster. And if you want to look at the tipping point that makes the disappearance of mountain ice in Greenland inevitable, that is the same tipping point. It's the same tipping point when we started losing sea ice in the Arctic faster and faster. Because here's how it works. When you lose all the surrounding sea ice, all the surrounding ice around the whole of Greenland, of course you get warmer waters around Greenland, warmer than ice, and you get warmer air systems, warmer atmosphere over Greenland, and you lose the jet stream, so you get all these crazy heat waves from Europe and Africa and whatever coming up here to warm the 4,000 meter high mountain glaciers in Greenland. So it's all just one major tipping point, one major point of no return. And this is sort of a taboo in the science press and in the mainstream media, that how can a very important point or decision be in the past? How can something be too late? Because we don't want it to be too late. Oh, please say it's not too late. Please say it's going to be fine. It's all going to be alright. But, you know, if you study the data and the physics of this, sometimes an important point, an important decision point may actually be in the past. So my kind of half joke suggestion is to gather all the greatest physicists in the world in a major Manhattan project to study the time-space continuum of the planet and the universe, and try and find some way to allow time travel so that we can send all these United Nations delegates and climate experts back in time to, let's say, the 1960s, and try and influence the energy mix used by human civilization, let's say in the 1950s and 1960s, and get us off oil, maybe introduce a carbon tax in 1950 to make people make smarter choices. And so time travel, absolutely thumbs up. And but we need like 1,000 physicists working for a decade to find some way to puncture the time-space continuum, and that's my suggestion for saving civilization. Okay, bye.